Hi Lexitecture listeners, I'm Barry McStay.
And I'm Ben van der Velde.
And we'd love you to listen to Worst Foot Forward, our podcast all about failure.
Each week we are joined by a guest to discuss the world's worst something. From poet to policeman, serial killer to mythical creature, we dive into humankind's darkest depths in search of the absolute pits.
We've also got an episode we know will be right up your streets, as we talked to comedian Richard Soames about the world's worst word. There are a lot of German multisyllables.
On Worst Foot Forward, we've also learned why rocks aren't really hard, why lacrosse can cause military catastrophes, and what happens when the French make sexy computer games.
While also uncovering murderous game show contestants, pirates who plundered hats as booty, and learning why February the 30th should be a Swedish national holiday.
Subscribe to Worst Foot Forward on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out our website, worstfootforwardpodcast.com, and join us for some fun-filled zero worship.
Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I present a new word to each other and you, delving into its past, uncovering its secrets, and discovering that even the most basic, unassuming word can offer up precious truth nuggets of wordy trivia gold. If that sounds like the show for you, it probably is, so tell your friends and come along for the ride. Today's episode, Sorry Boulevard.
We better do some words, eh?
We should do some
I think
words.
it's your turn to go first.
Okay, I will go first.
Although I don't know that we really have such things as turns.
I don't know that we're doing turns, but I'm happy to take the lead on this morning's activities.
Cool.
So my word today is boulevard.
Ooh, interesting.
And so dictionary.com's brief summary of the definition of boulevard is a broad avenue in a city, usually having areas at the sides or center for trees, grass, or flowers.
Okay.
I feel like, I don't know how common these are in most sort of average British and European towns on account of space constraints and a lot of them built before cars and city planning and stuff. Like I know that European cars, for instance, tend to be tiny by North American standards because the roads are correspondingly tiny.
I think what you mean is North American cars are enormous gas-guzzling monsters.
I'm
pretty sure that's how you meant to say it.
because the streets are stupid wastes of space and asphalt.
Because your country is basically empty.
Is the counterpart. Because our countries are basically empty. That's essentially it. Yes. So the boulevard became wildly popular in North America, particularly American kind of city planning. The grand center main streets made really huge for honestly not much reason other than to be there. But it's, as one might guess, it is a word of French origin, one of the myriad gifts of the French to the English, despite, let's say, a slightly tense historical relationship.
I can't really comment on that because historically France and Scotland have really wonderful relationships.
Well, I would imagine so. It's amazing
the English
what a
not so
common
much,
hated enemy will do for a
but
pair
the
of
Scots
countries.
and the French, we get along just fine.
That's Well, I feel like that makes a lot of sense to me.
And now I'll stop biting your hand off and being both nationalistic and nationalistic, I suppose.
All good.
And let you continue to talk about Boulevard.
French loanword. It's which is in turn an adaptation, or possibly a more accurate phrase would be a mangling of a Dutch word, which was similar to boulevard in general, but it's the Dutch word is where we get the English word bulwark, bulwark.
Okay.
And so a bulwark is a sort of a fortification or a wall or a rampart or some sort of barricade, usually around either encompassing or just outside in a specific space, a city or a settlement, just as an extra defensive measure. So you see the old just log from old forts in North America, anyway, log, or in other places, stone kind of walls or gutters, right? Those are all bulwarks. And the reason that this comes from the Dutch word for bulwark is that what a boulevard was that it was the area along the top of the walls of a city.
Oh, okay.
So that area, that sort of empty space where the soldiers would come and go if there needed to be a defensive measure taken from the wall, that flat roof of the wall around a city became the boulevard.
Of course,
And so that's the
you realise what you're making me think of by talking about defences from up high and walls.
I can only imagine it would be something to do with Monty Python.
Of course.
Yeah.
Good to see that our mind reading is working fine today.
And the French connection there, of course, fetching the vache and all
Exactly.
the rest, yeah.
Yes.
I don't smell any elderberries yet, but we'll see. So, yeah, the idea was that... Sorry, I've woke up with a cough. So the idea is that in the older settlements, they would have a city wall that was either current or, as time went on, less and less used, but it was still there. And obviously, to get rid of the whole wall was a massive endeavor, and generally the city had sort of encompassed the wall and grown it around it, as you see in so many small European medieval towns that are now like, you can see where the wall used to matter, and now it just doesn't matter anymore. But what it made them is it made a natural kind of ring road of a very spacious place in a spot where the city design, quote unquote, was little cart paths and winding narrow alleyways and stuff. It made for a very convenient way to get around. And so hence the idea of a road in a city that is much more broad and much more spacious, and in a sense much more decorative than the standard streets of a city.
That's wonderful.
And then off on a slight tangent is digging a little further into bulwark. The idea of the bulwark is, comes from both kind of an amalgamation of Edym Online and the OED's etymology section for boulevard and then bulwark, is that the English word is thought to come either straight from the Dutch or the French and Middle High German words are pretty much identical. And it's thought to be made up of a compound of bole, B-O-L-E, so like a log or a tree trunk, and work. So a bulwark was literally just a work of logs, a construction of logs, because those would be the first things that they would be easily accessed and lashed together and formed into a defensive measure. So boulevard, broad city street, top of an old crumbling stone wall defensive measure, to bulwark, literally just a thing made out of logs. See our episode on log earlier for more details on that.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about log because that was a really great word. That was one of those entries where I really wished I'd thought of looking at that word because it was so fantastic. It was so interesting. That's so great. I'm just busy thinking about Unter der Linden, which is it's actually a song, but there is a. Sorry, I'm clearly Googling while I speak and not able to do both things at the same time seamlessly. But Unter der Linden is a boulevard in Berlin. I'm very much thinking about Berlin at the moment. And as you said, there are a lot of sort of small medieval towns where no one really seemed to think that the roads might include some space. And I think that is a feature of, if you come to cities in Europe that have still got an old town, you don't generally expect to be able to drive in the old town. And
right.
I think a lot of the times these days that's partly because the streets aren't suitable, but partly because the city has elected to get traffic out of the old town to avoid pollution and to let the tourists wander and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The one exception to that I've experienced in quite terrifying fashion is in Krakow, which is a beautiful city.
Okay.
And when I when I arrived there, I was with my husband, and we weren't quite sure how to get to our hotel from the airport. So we'd gotten a train into the centre, and then we had to get a bus to the hotel. And due to, long story short, we got on the wrong bus. It was my fault. It was the right route, but it was going in the wrong direction.
Oh, okay.
So we found ourselves quite late at night on our own on a bus that was very quickly, according to Google Maps, taking us in the exact opposite direction to where we wanted to go.
That's always a good feeling.
And, yeah. So we were hoping that it would eventually bring us all the way back round again, but it didn't. It stopped and kicked us off. So we had a little adventure when we first arrived. But it was a bus. It was a single-decker, standard-length bus, hurtling through the tiniest medieval streets you can imagine. And lots of parked cars. Lots of parked cars on both sides of the tiny streets, and yet somehow the bus driver managed to transport us at quite great speeds at some points. And yeah, it was an experience. It really was.
That's fantastic.
Polish bus drivers obviously have balls of steel.
Yeah. They actually have to make the doors a little bit wider to accommodate them. It's crazy.
But then you find, so when the city planning has taken place at a slightly later date in history, in fact, European cities tend to be resplendent with boulevards. Boulevards in the OED sense of the word.
Yeah.
So Unter den Linden in Berlin is a lovely example of that. It is an enormously broad street. The Linden refers to the trees, the linden trees, which are willow trees? I can't remember. Why can't I remember what a linden tree is? I tell you what it is, it's because I know the word linden, and in the British Isles they're commonly called lime trees, but linden is the word that I would use to describe them anyway.
Okay.
And it's absolutely beautiful. So what Wikipedia has to say about Unter den Linden, firstly, it runs from the City Palace to the Brandenburg Gate, so two very prominent, beautiful landmarks that tourists are likely to want to see. And it has linden trees or lime trees that line the grassed pedestrian mall on the median and the two broad carriageways. So it's a huge street. It's a huge street that's suitable for traffic, and it's suitable for pedestrians, and it's beautiful for both.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of cities that don't... There are a lot of cities where it's very hard to imagine that such considerations as space, access and beauty would all be considered. I think these days, 1 out of the 3 of those is perhaps considered in the very best case scenario. But these plans were obviously made at a time when space was abundant, there was plenty of money, and people actually considered what was the street going to be used for, how was it going to work, and shouldn't it look pretty and be an enjoyable space to kind of be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas these days we just use roads to get from one place to the other.
Yeah, just purely utilitarian.
Logs, man. I'm just thinking about how great an entry log was, and to take it forward into Bulwark as you've done, it makes me wonder how far the sort of influence of woody related words has spread into our modern usage.
It'd be an interesting study to trace the family tree of the word log.
Ah, Ryan, that's so brilliant. If you don't feel pleased with yourself right now, you should.
Oh, I definitely do. I was pretty happy with that.
Ah, the family tree of the log.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So, Boulevard.
There is the title for your first book, definitely.
That's right.
Well, hey, Roger, what do you say?
Yes.
In an uncharacteristically organised move, I have looked up Boulevard while listening to what you had to say about it.
Oh, nice.
And in the alphabetical index, there are only 2 synonyms given for Boulevard. The first one is pleasance, which I like a great deal, because when you started to talk about Boulevard, I immediately began to think about how rare it is to have the word Boulevard used as a street name. Certainly in this part of the world. So the sort of obvious one you think of is Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
But in the UK, certainly street and avenue and lane and road are much, much more common than boulevard might be.
Yeah.
But occasionally the word pleasance is used. And I
That's
do
very
like
nice.
when a pleasance is a noun.
Yeah.
So if we investigate that a little bit further in the in the section of Roget's that is entitled Space in General, which for some reason I'm finding quite funny. Space in general, pleasance is included in that. And so we have park, grounds, pleasure, as in pleasure gardens, green, walk, mall, avenue, parade, promenade, boulevard, national park, theme, adventure, safari, parkland, chase. So a few occasions there where the casual Roget user could go wrong if they weren't fully aware of all of the different meanings and all the different contexts of these words. But connotations, sorry. But yeah, I think that the notion that a boulevard is a pleasant place to be is one that would certainly assert itself when I heard the word, rather than the idea of the kind of old-fashioned ring road. That's great.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. The second entry for boulevard is simply path.
Oh, well, that's...
And yeah, another bit, it's a bit of a diversion, isn't it? Because a boulevard and a path are not the same thing.
No, it's a very minimalist interpretation of the word, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So, the word that I am going to talk about today is a word that I have an uneasy relationship with.
Okay.
I will tell you why that is. When I learned to be a yoga teacher, I am a forest yoga teacher. It doesn't have anything to do with trees. People often make that mistake. It is a style of yoga that was developed by an American woman called Anna Forrest. So she gave her name to the style.
Okay.
And she teaches the teacher trainings, almost all of the teacher trainings these days. She also has a team of senior teachers who do some of the teaching. And she is a formidable human being, Anna Forrest. She really is. She's incredible, but most people are a bit scared of her, I think, when they first meet her, certainly. Perhaps even beyond that. She's formidable. And one of the sort of house rules of teacher trainings with Anna Forrest is that the word sorry is not allowed. For the simple reason that most people are far more sorry than they need to be. So I think we've talked about something similar before, where we've mentioned that people either give a damn or they don't give a damn, and finding that middle ground of people who give enough of a damn can be an interesting one.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sorry is a similar sort of affair. Now, this always makes me cringe a little bit, but it is also a very, very effective tool. If on teacher training, which for the foundation part of the training lasts for a month, if you do say that you're sorry, someone will correct you. They will point out that you've said sorry, and then they will ask you to repeat whatever it was that you said and replace the word sorry with the word sexy. So it really changes the intention and energetic of what you meant. Right. You know, if a stranger barges into you in a busy, crowded place, I think for a lot of people, even though they've done nothing wrong, quite often the instinct is to say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Imagine if you barged into someone and rather than deferring and kind of getting out of your way and looking as though it was their fault, they were to say to you, "I'm really sexy." You know? So it's an interesting one. And so by sort of week 2, you have people proclaiming, "I am so fucking sexy right now, I can't believe it." And it's very funny. However, I also maybe it's because I'm a little bit more attuned to it because of that experience, but these days online, lots of people are sorry for things that they couldn't possibly be responsible for. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Someone might post about having had... A friend of mine posted a little while ago about having an interaction with a stranger. She was feeling really good and she smiled at this guy, and he was very, very much offended by the fact that she had taken the time to smile. And it ended with this guy, who clearly had some stuff going on for himself, being quite abusive towards my friend, shouting at her,
Jeez.
calling her names. And all she had done was smile. And so, yeah, sigh, exactly. And so lots of people responded to say to my friend, wow, that's a terrible thing that happened to you. And quite a lot of those responses started with, I'm sorry. And I started to think, why are you sorry?
Yeah.
And it's that way that, we apologise for so many things. And quite a lot of them, they're not in our power anyway. So why should we take responsibility for apologising? Now, I am not a terrible dickhead, and I do not wish to say that I am batting away any good intentions when people use the word I'm sorry.
Right.
For example, if someone was to say, oh, my cat died yesterday, I think a pretty standard and often very heartfelt response would be, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean, yes, your cat died because I kicked it until it happened. It means I extend my feelings of sorrow towards you.
Yeah, and this
So-
might get into the Roger territory, but an inappropriate response would be, if someone said, my cat just died, would be to say, I apologize.
Yes.
Because that has a whole different, yeah.
Exactly. And so I have personally tried to cut out my use of the word sorry as much as I am linguistically able to. And so these days I'm much more likely to say that I apologise. Because just as you say in the example with the cat, that implies, the sort of semantics of that is, I was responsible for something that did or didn't happen as a result of my agency. And so
Yeah.
therefore I must apologise. Anyway, that's why I was interested in the word. And I've already, while talking about it, made reference to sorrow. And I think that most people would assume that the etymology of the word sorry would be intricately linked with the etymology of the word sorrow.
Yeah.
But it isn't.
Oh.
Da da da.
Da, da, da.
Oh. So, I looked up the word firstly, as I often do when I'm preparing for episodes, to see if a word is interesting or not. I went to Etym Online to
Right.
just have a wee bit of a background dig. Where I discovered, and as you said before, this is very much a kind of a dance between what Etym Online has to say and what OED has to say. So originally, what we have here is Old English sarig, that's S-A-R-I-G, distressed, grieved, full of sorrow. From Proto-Germanic sairiga, painful, source also of Old Saxon serag, Middle Dutch serig, sore, sad, sorry. And so I began to see, okay, this is, we run through lots of other variants from sarig, this Old English word, and we eventually get to our kind of core of what the word means. We have meaning wretched, worthless or poor, first recorded in the mid-13th century, as in a sorry state of affairs. And the spelling shift from A to O came by influence of sorrow. Hang on a minute, you may be thinking, I've just said that it doesn't have anything to do with sorrow. That would be technically incorrect. It does have something to do with sorrow, but that is not directly where the word has come from.
Okay.
So, to the OED, which is an enormous entry, which I've currently lost the part that I'm getting with. Okay. And the definition is given here as distressed, sad, feeling grief or sorrow. So again, we come back to this idea of sorrow. However, when you dig into the etymology on OED, here is what it says. Cognate with or formed similarly to West Frisian searich, S-E-A-R-I-C-H, sore, spotty, scabby.
Oh.
Oh, indeed. Middle Dutch, serich, serich or zerich, sore, ill, scabby. Sad, feeling grief or sorrow. Dutch, now regional, zerig or zierig, sore, sensitive, hurt, sad, grieving, scabby, etc. I do love an etc. next to two words which do not in any way mean the same thing, such as
Yeah.
grieving and scabby.
Grieving and scabby. That's...
Old Saxon serag, sad. Middle Low German serich, ill, scabby. Old High German serag, Middle High German serich, serich, hurt, painful, sore, ill, painful, hurt, sensitive, scabby. These are the words that are coming up again and again and again. And so we come to, already in Old English, closely associated with the etymologically unrelated word sorrow and its derivatives, which occupied the same semantic field of distress and suffering, and with which it developed an even closer formal resemblance in Middle English after the rounding of long A to long open O.
Okay.
So we find that to be sorry is to be sore.
Okay.
And to be sorrowful is to be sad. However, the two words have kind of crossed paths. And then they've maybe crossed paths again, and then they've had occasion to swap numbers, and maybe they've done a little bit of hanging out together, and they get along reasonably well. And so you start to think of them as together, even though they're not actually together.
Yeah, they're not.
But I love this notion that what you are actually expressing is not your regret or your sorrow, it is your pain. So, my cat was run over last week. I feel your pain. That seems to me a much more appropriate response, both emotionally and semantically.
It's much more empathetic than sorrow.
Than I'm sorry, I have sorrow. Sorrow is present for you.
And sorrow is inward as well, right? Sorrow is like, I have it, whereas if it's like your tragedy or obstacle or hardship is causing me pain, I don't know, it's interesting. There's a more empathetic angle to it.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. So, we find that the two words, this is continuing with OED, two words and their derivatives are often collocated. And there are quotations from very, very, very far back. I suppose that makes sense, because both pain and sorrow are part of the human condition for as long as, I suppose, the human condition has existed. Mm-hmm. So we have reference to the first meaning of the word distressed, sad, feeling grief or sorrow in early Old English. King Aelfred, early Old English. We have it pre-Beowulf. Really, really, and as I say, given the nature of the word, it's not hard to see why the word has been around, or the need to express the meaning of this word has been around for such a long time. When we look back to Etym Online and what they had to say, and I found this very, very interesting. Etym Online says, apologetic sense, short for I'm sorry, is attested from 1834. Now, I found that was very interesting, partly because I hate the use of sorry as in the apologetic sense. Also, that was much, much later than I was expecting.
Yeah.
So, considering that the word has been around for pretty much as long as we have written records of what we now know as English, I thought that 1834 was really a very recent place for that sort of sense to have happened. However, I think that, as the longer entry does kind of attest, we have, scrolling frequently, we have the sense of expressing or showing sorrow, very, very, very old. Beowulf is our first quotation there. Causing distress or sorrow, still we're into Old English. Being sorry for, or sorry about something. So I feel like this is kind of brushing against the sense of apologetic. And this also still has early Old English citations. So people have been sorry for a very, very, very long time. The notion that we might express remorse through sorrow, which is the third definition given by the OED, continues to be an Old English sense. So I hate to have to contradict Etym Online, but I feel as though when they say the sense of being apologetic is recorded 1834, I feel like remorse and apologetic are they're very, very close, if not the same thing.
Yeah, those are very close.
I feel like that was perhaps a little bit misleading, so I'm glad I looked a little bit more closely. The phrase, if you like, I am sorry, to be sorry, that is much later. So that's our 1843. From Sargent's New Monthly Magazine. Miss Marion, good morning. See you tomorrow. Sorry I'm in such haste. So I presume that the Etymon line citation that they're using to state that the apologetic sense of the meaning of the word is from 1843 is from this place here.
Right.
So the construction of I am sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, very, very much more recent. And the sense of I'm sorry, very, very much more recent. So the meaning of what did you say or could you repeat that? The first written citation here is given in 1965.
Wow.
Yeah, I was also very taken aback by that. And yeah, there are so many other ways to use the word beyond the apologetic one that I was thinking of. So again, the adjective to describe a person or a situation is wretched, pathetic or poor. That's from 1225. Someone about whom we feel sorrow, a sorry man. So you can see again that the two definitions, despite having started from different places, they do come to similar definitions.
Yeah, they're kind of braided together a little bit.
Yeah, they are. And that makes sense because sorrow, sadness leads to pain. And while physical pain is a more obvious, for example, you may not be able to see that someone is in pain. However, you can tell pretty quickly by their responses to that physical pain. People tend to hide emotional pain, I think, a little bit more successfully.
Yeah.
So yeah, we run through having having sympathy or pity, very early to 1400s. We have to be sorry for oneself from 1767. More wretched and sorrow for people. The utterance of I'm sorry, a statement of regret or remorse or an apology, the first written citation given for that is in Jane Austen in 1807. So the notion that sorrow or soreness exists and should be expressed is pretty much as old as the language itself. The compulsive need to apologise, who knows where that began to be really ingrained in our culture. But an interesting word, both because of its twinned etymology between sore and sorrow, and also because I wish that people weren't so damn sorry for things that they're not responsible for.
I'm also glad that this was your word, because as a Canadian, it would just be too typecasting for me to explore the word sorry. So
I didn't think of that. That's hilarious.
It's pretty handy that you were willing to take up that particular gauntlet, because we just never would have done it. That's it for another episode of Lexitecture. If you like what you've heard, please spread the words. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Lexitecture, Lexitecture, and find us on our website at lexitecture.com. We also love hearing from you, so if you've got a word you'd like us to look into, a tasty bit of trivia to share, or anything else you'd like to tell us, drop us a line at words@lexitecture.com. Talk to you next time. Bye.